How about in honor of Linda, since she sings, we'll just do the refrain. Maybe today we can start learning the tune of the refrain. Is that good? You remembered it? I remembered that part. These are the women I come from. The faith that sustains them is bred in my bones. I know what I'm made of and where I belong. 'Cause these are the women I come from. So there we got that. Julia's going to introduce Linda.
That has a little bit of the Amy Grant.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it does, sort of.
That's a great thing. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Julia Hall, and I help Elizabeth put the ladies' lunches together, the Keepers of the Flame lunches together. So I have the rare and unique privilege today of introducing our speaker. Well, what a turnout, Miss Linda. It's a shame nobody loves you. We know Linda for the way she leads our kids, sings children. She stands confidently before them, always smiling, energetically directing them, singing with them, encouraging them, and often inviting us to join them. And we know her in her blue chancel choir robe, steadfastly, week after week, singing with the choir. And I have to say, I don't know about anybody else in the room, but I always feel like Linda's singing directly at me because she has such a wonderful gift of looking out into the congregation. Beyond these two musical forms, it's been my experience that these same postures and characteristics define all Linda does. Confident, smiling, energetic, singing, encouraging, inviting, and steadfast. I'm grateful, as I know each one of you are, that she said yes to sharing with us today, even though she comes forward wishing she may have said no. Because I know she comes as a professional musician and piano teacher, as Arvel's wife and his daughter, sister, and mother. And we are blessed to have her son David with us today. So we are all should give him a warm welcome for being brave enough to enter into this bevy of beauties, I should say. We also have a few other male infiltrators, which we will welcome warmly. Michael Rentibus, trying to sit quietly in the back. I know a friend and admirer of Linda. And Scott Bridges is with us today, too. Scott is Pam's husband, and Pam has helped Linda with Kids Sing. I'm eager to hear about the relationship and experiences and faith that have formed Linda. So without further ado, Miss Linda, it's all yours.
I didn't know if I could walk across the floor. I'm shaking so bad. Confidence is more mine when I sing and not when I speak. I've had to do some soul searching ever since I said yes to the very pleasant and very pregnant Elizabeth King when she asked me to speak at the Keepers of the Flame series. The flame, in order for one candle to be lit by another, someone must have the faith to keep its wick lit for the next keeper. To kindle the embers of our love, forgiveness means letting go of our control issues and letting Jesus take the wheel. With Jesus at the helm of my life, I've always believed in his promise and relied on him for courage. When I was sick as a child, when I needed confidence to learn, to perform, and to teach music, and most of all for my Arvel and my family, my son David and Jim, especially, to show God's love when times were tough, and those who helped to keep my faith are all quite remarkable. My keepers were wonderful stewards of the light of God. They nurtured the seeds of God's love from the planting to the gardening, from the drought to the flood, and gentle rain and flowers. I'm a lucky gal to say that I had significant kindlers in my life. My mom, Arvel, my church friends, and my teachers, such as my 5th grade teacher, who helped me so much on the path to being confident. Once at a choir party, Arvel was asked what it was that made a long-time married couple successful, and he replied, "There's always a peacock in every couple. And as long as those roles are understood, the couple is pretty steady." And I had to ask him, "Honey, am I your peacock?" And he just looked at me with those loving and adoring eyes. And he said, "Yes, of course you are." And Arvel did treat me like I was precious, and I treasure everything about his love. But I didn't always feel my inner peacock. When I was 10 years old, I ran a terrible fever, and afterwards I began to have seizures. For 2 years, until they were resolved, I missed a lot of school. I couldn't do any physical activity, no dancing, no swimming, no bike riding, no skating, no nothing. And in preparation for this speech, I remembered when I was better and I went back to school. Frances Hines, my 5th grade teacher, saw a child who was going through a traumatic illness and needed a little boost in her confidence. I owe a lot to Miss Haynes and her compassionate spirit, because she encouraged me and helped me build my spirit back to feeling normal again. Because I didn't feel normal, believe me. It was only recently that I even thought of her, but sometimes when we look back on our lives, we have memories that fall out like little cobwebs out of our brain, and that was a pleasant cobweb to think about. Thank you, Miss Haynes, wherever you are. More about that in a minute. But as Julie Andrews once sang, "Let's start at the very beginning." I was born in Winchester, Virginia, up near Washington, D.C., the middle child, having 2 brothers. We lived on a street where there were 36 children living, and you can imagine the fun we had. It was a time, we were talking, Joyce, children played outside. There were no televisions, no computers, no cell phones. We skated. We built tree houses. We played with our dollies. We rode our bicycles and tricycles, and we had fantasy circuses. Speaking of fantasy, Jean said, I'm glad my mother always encouraged my imagination. Fantasy has always allowed me the freedom to pretend a lot. I was my own drama queen. And I can remember standing in front of Mama's mirror, dressed up in all her jewelry, and I did, and I would just be my own show. I would be my own show. The first person who shaped my life was my mother. My dad worked all the time, and she coped with 3 kids in a crazy neighborhood, but she was a survivor. She faced many challenges in her life. When she was only 3 years old, her mother died, leaving her and her brother and sister. Several years later, her father remarried a woman who was so jealous of his first wife that she would not allow Mom to mourn her mother's death. She destroyed every picture of her mother. When at age 4, Mother would say she'd go crying and missing her mother. The only comfort came from her daddy. Mother should have had a t-shirt, though, printed with, "Denial is not a river in Egypt," because she hid her hurt. She avoided conflict. But in doing so, she developed a spirit of survival and positivity, and she gave that to me. Pretend you're happy when you're blue was the message I received very early. So I spent my life smiling and pretending I wasn't going through any hardships. In 1971, my father was diagnosed with leukemia, and he died 4 months later. Mom was only 56, and my sister Janet was 15. Mom always was a stay-at-home mom. She never worked. She never had a job. She didn't have a high school degree, but she had to find work to survive. So she got a job at a local laundry, taking in other people's clothes. Then they found out she could alter and mend clothes, because she altered and mended all our clothes. Later, she found a job at a better job at a belt store in the alteration department. She loved it, and she worked, and she was 86 years old. Arvel used to say, "Mom, you're the only woman I know still putting money in her 401k." So she lived independently, and finally she came to live with us at age 96. And she died at 98. And Jan, we did her funeral. I was so grateful for that. Mother instilled in me from as early as I can remember that I was a special child, and she would see to it that I was loved and taken care of in a way she couldn't experience. Music and dance were the first gifts she gave me. At 4 years old, I wanted to be a ballerina. And so one day, I went into the kitchen and I looked up in the cabinet and I found some Tupperware little cups. How many remember the old Tupperware cups? The little ones? And I put them on my toes. And I got in front of Mom's mirror and I turned the radio on and I danced and I thought I was wonderful. Soon after, Mom decided she better enroll me in dance class. So, in ballet class. Now, she didn't drive, so the two of us would go in a taxi cab to my lesson. And it was there. This lady played the most beautiful music to accompany our lessons. And I didn't know it was classical music, but that's what she did, the Mozart. She did the wonderful music that I was only 5 years old. So, you know, it really took with me. And Mom also took me to ballet performances, and I thought they were magical. Neither Mama or Daddy had any musical talent or background. However, they took me to church when I was a young child. And I loved the songs I learned there, and the performances by the choir every week, and at Christmas and Easter. In the primary department, though, how many know what the primary department was? Raise your hands if you know. That was where the first, second, third, fourth graders went. There was a lady who played the piano, and she'd go up and down the key. She could play, "Oh Jesus, Lord," and say, and I was going, "Oh my gosh, that is so wonderful. If I could only do this." I'd wait till everybody got out of the primary department, and it was just me and the piano, and I'd sit down. I'd pretend I was her, and I'd go up and down the keys. So I always wanted to play the piano. So, let me get back to my notes here. When I was, most of the music I grew up with outside of church was ballet music, or classical music from my ballet, and country music. Patsy Cline lived in my grandfather's duplex next door to him. And I heard her as a teenager. Yes. And of course, I didn't know then how famous she would become. When I was in the second grade, I joined Brownies. Anybody join Brownies in here? Oh, yeah. And in the fourth grade, I moved on to Girl Scouts. Now, it was there I learned camp songs and rounds, and I love singing. And that summer, though, I was going to Girl Scout camp, and I had to get a typhoid shot so I could go. And as a result, several weeks later, I began to have seizures. And I ran this very, very high temperature, and they were epileptic seizures. Mom and Dad took me to the University of Virginia Hospital, and I had all kind of tests run. They put me on all kind of seizure medication, and I was a zombie. I had to stop all physical activity, including my dancing lessons. So I begged my parents to buy me a piano. They said they couldn't afford one. So finally, at 12 years old, they bought me a piano, an old upright. And they signed me up for group pianos at a local music store. You can imagine. But I was learning to play. A few months later, Daddy was transferred and we moved from Winchester, Virginia to Danville, Virginia. Interesting, Winchester and Danville is, yeah, isn't that interesting? Yeah. Mom found a sweet lady to teach me. And after many bad recitals, one time I played the spring song and only learned the first part of the first refrain. And I got up there in my big fancy dress Mommy made me and I played da 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 bum bum bum. Nothing. Da 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 bum bum bum. Nothing. That really affected my performance. Because after that I didn't ever want to perform again. So anyway, back to this. Mom prayed for me. My mother's best friend was Catholic, and she asked Rosalie to get the nuns to pray every day for me. 2 years later, I had the measles, and I ran another high temperature. And praise God, the seizure stopped. I call that a miracle. I call that a miracle. Okay, I'm messed up here. Okay. Daddy was transferred to Danville. Mother found a sweet lady to teach me, and after many bad recitals. Okay. So I told Mother at age 15, I said, Mom, I will pay the difference if you will call the college and get me a professor to teach me. Because I wanted to be an organ major. Look at these hands. I wanted to be an organ major, and I wanted to be a church musician. Okay? So, fortunately, I did get a music scholarship for tuition to Avery College in my hometown. Now, it was during this time that I had made a commitment to Christ as my Lord and Savior. I had been baptized, but I never really made a commitment. And I became very passionate about this, like I am about everything. I attended Billy Graham crusades. I stood on the street corner when it was snow and everything, passing out tracts, telling people how to be saved. I even went to the local priest. There was one Catholic church in our town, and I convinced him that he was all wrong. I was so sure that Catholics were going to hell. So anyway, I was very passionate. At 18 years old, I felt God had other plans for me. I wanted to go to college, of course, but I was in a bad relationship with this guy at home, and I just couldn't break it off, even though people told me. And so I got on my hands and knees for 2 months, and I prayed every day that God would send me somebody to share my passion of Christ. Well, He did answer my prayers, and oh my, how He did. I was on the Bible quiz team at my local college, my local Youth for Christ group, and we were selected to be in the championship at Sullins College in Bristol, Tennessee. And I won a free trip because I was their star quizzer. Okay. All right. So anyway, and that Sunday afternoon, I was on the stage, sitting they had little buzzer things, and ready to spring up with the correct scripture that was started to be read. And I looked into the audience, and I saw the cutest guy. He had on horn-rimmed glasses and a flat top, and I thought, I've got to meet him. I've got to meet him. It really was almost like there was a light shining. It really wasn't, but anyway, that was the other fantasy. Okay. Anyway, it turned out that he was from Louisville, Kentucky, and he was a counselor, and he had been a chaperone for his group from Louisville, and my roommate knew him. So she arranged for us to meet that day, and that evening after the youth rally, where we were both counselors, we came back to the college, And we sat on the steps of Sullins College, and we talked, and we talked, and we talked. And finally they made us go in, because it was time to go in. The next day I told him, "You're my mate." He looked at me and he said, "Well, how do you know?" and I said, "Well, God told me." He said, "Well, he didn't tell me." And he said, "Besides that, I've been called to be a preacher." And I said, "I've been called to be a preacher's wife." Play the organ? Okay. So he went up to this, we had a blackboard back then, he went up and drew a hexagon, and in it he wrote S-L-O-W. Slow. Now we were together every spare minute that week, and when we parted, he said he would go home and pray about it, back to Louisville. I walked into his house. He said, his mom and dad and aunt and uncle were sitting there waiting for him, and he said, "Mom, Dad, I met the girl I'm going to marry." And they looked at him. He was 18, their only child. They said, "Well, what's her name?" He said, "Linda, something, I got it written down." Anyway, and back to the hood. So anyway, he did pray about it, and must have prayed through, because I received an 8x10 glossy that next week. And a picture of him. We corresponded by letters and weekly phone calls, and we were 500 miles apart. So during breaks, he would come to see me on a Greyhound bus, because he had no car. And I would go to see him the same way. And needless to say, this was very hard on us, because we just couldn't stand to be apart. We just couldn't stand it. So after 3 semesters, he said, "Honey, you got to transfer to Asbury College," where he was. Arva was a Greek major. Now his plans were that he would become a Wycliffe Bible translator. Does anybody know what that is? Okay, Jan does, okay. And he wanted to go to Africa. His plans were to live among a native tribe, learn their language, and if they didn't eat him, he would translate the book of John to them. That was his words. Okay, well, needless to say, after he met me, that sort of changed. At Asbury, I was fortunate enough to have a professor in piano who saw, I guess, my weaknesses, and as far as my technical skills, and she said, "Why don't you go into music education?" And I said, "Well, what would that mean?" She said, "That means another year of college, because you're transferring and you have to take all those education courses." So I did, and it was the best decision that I ever made. Arva and I got married in 1963 and moved to Wilmore so I could finish college. We lived in a 10 by 27 foot trailer near the sewer plant. Yes. Now, with only $100 in our pocket, he had to find a job, because I was in school, obviously. First one was selling sewing machines door to door. Can you see Arva selling door to door? I said, "Honey, you can't even thread the thing. Let's sell it." And then he got a job selling cemetery lots for Memorial Gardens, door to door, cold call. He had to memorize a 27-page single-space presentation, complete with nods and gestures. And I had to help him do that. So anyway, finally he found another job. In the meantime, he had changed his major to psychology. And so he found another job at Eastern State Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky, as a social worker. So we drive from Wilmore to Lexington every day. And it was during this time that he applied for and received a mental health scholarship to get his master's degree. Now, while he was in graduate school, I got my first teaching job, 23 years old, in a junior high school, teaching all 7th grade boys. Oh, I was, and no plans, no structure, no nothing. I had to just use whatever I could to keep the spitballs from going back and forth in the classroom. I couldn't wait to get pregnant so I could stay at home. Teaching was not for me. But after he graduated from Kent School, we moved to Lexington. He began working again at Eastern State Hospital. David was born in 1966, and Jimmy was born in 1970. Now, even though we couldn't afford it, the first thing he bought me was a 54-inch upright Yamaha piano straight from Japan, so I could teach at home and privately. Now, I love being a stay-at-home mom. I volunteered my time in the community. I went to Cardinal Hill. I went to the libraries. I worked for the neighborhood organization of women and did all kind of music programs. Took my little auto harp with me, just going on, you know. But I did mainly preschool at that time. I started a children's choir, and I played the organ and piano at the Baptist church we attended. Now, during the summer of 1973, a friend of mine who went to Central Christian Church said, "There's this great program down there for inner city children. It's called Impact." Raise your hand if you remember it. No, you do. You can tell them. Yeah, okay, Julia does. Were you in Impact? Yes. Yeah, okay. And so she said, "Well, would you like to come and help out since you know music?" And I did, and I was amazed because it was so targeted to the inner city child, yet it was targeted to all children. Well, Lorella Lederer was the interim back then, yeah. Okay. So anyway, that fall we decided to move our membership to Central Christian. And I joined the Transfer Choir, and I met many wonderful members and became active in Ivy Club. Yeah, we don't have any old Ivy Clubbers. Okay, that was for couples married only 4 years. Okay, but it went on to be longer than that. In 1973, having gotten a job at Student Health at UK, Arvel decided to leave the University of Kentucky and go into private practice. And he came home one day and he said, "Honey, you got to go back to work." And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "We need health insurance." So, returning to teaching was difficult, to say the least. I hadn't taught in 10 years. Integration had occurred. My first job was at Arlington Elementary, an inner city school. It didn't take me too long to realize I was in deep water. But I remembered what I had experienced earlier at Central Christian Church's Impact program. And I started attending elementary music workshops every summer for about 8 years. And I learned how to teach children, or I wanted to learn how to teach children to experience and love making music. And I taught for 27 years. And when I retired, Pam Miller, not Pam Miller. Gosh. Pam Smith then. Miller Smith called me and she said, "Would you be interested in working with the children's choir?" And I was just off, like days away from retirement. And I said, "No." And several hours later, I got a call from Michael Rentema. Okay. And he wanted to take me to lunch. Wasn't that sweet? He knew the secret to my heart is eating. And so anyway, he wanted me to work with the children at Central. And saying no to Michael is impossible for me. So we started on this journey, which has lasted 20 years. We've worked together hand in glove to nurture and grow kids sing. We can almost read each other's thoughts. He's so organized and I'm so scatterbrained, and he has everything for me every week. But we worked hard and we built a great program. Do I see some little members back there? There's Sydney and there's Clara. They've been in our group. In conclusion, I have always desired a close walk with God. I find music brings me in tune with the part of me that draws me closer to God. I'm renewed when I sing and I feel cleansed, and I know God gave me the gift of teaching. And I am blessed when I am sharing it with others, whether it's standing in the choir, whether it's teaching children, whether it's teaching privately. My church family has meant so much to me, loving and nurturing me through these years, especially through Arville's illness and death. As many of you know, Arville died 10 months ago, yesterday. He had brain cancer. I miss him so much. He was my sweetheart, my cheerleader, my encourager. But I'm on a new journey, discovering things about myself I never imagined I'd do. And I'm confident God is not through with me. He gives me strength when I feel weak and faith that He is still in charge. As I was writing this, I looked in Arville's drawer and I pulled out, he was saver, he saved all kinds of stuff. And I pulled out this thing he had saved, and it was dated 2003. And it was a reminder of what I'd given him that day. He was having a really bad day. And I gave him this little hymn to remind him of God's love. And it goes like this. God has not promised skies always blue, flower-strewn pathways all our lives through. God has not promised sun without rain, joy without sorrow, or peace without pain. But God has promised strength for the day, rest for the labor, and light for the way. Grace for the trials, help from above, unfailing kindness, and undying love. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. I'm going to speak on behalf of everybody in the room to say that your presence blesses us not only today, but in the lives of the children who you have so lovingly taught all these years. Because not only was the church enriched by what you were doing down front, but the rest of us as well, whether we had a child in the program or not. So for that, I am grateful and thankful. And I know Miss Tabitha is too.
Yes, there's one of my
who I believe Miss Linda has inspired Tabitha to pursue a music teaching career because of the love and talent that she gleaned from Linda. So, kudos. I also want to remind everybody just a little quick piece of business. We will gather again on April 19th. I believe it's the Sunday after Easter. And our speaker will be Daisy Sneed.
You see what you just said.
Now, here's what I want to say, because when you all are so graciously accept our invitation to speak, you often say, "Oh gosh, I don't know what to say." Well, it's your story. Nobody knows it like you. So be willing to share it, because I know that each one of us takes away something every time we meet in this group from the wonderful women who have spoken. So, Miss Daisy, we will look forward to you in April. Laura.
Yes, I just want to say that I taught at Arlington as a pretty new teacher when she was there doing the music program, and Linda was absolutely incredible. She was a hurricane, a good hurricane, and she had, these kids, when I got there, these kids were poverty, incredible poverty. There was lots of drugs already. You know, that quadrant was just, the police would tell you it was the worst quadrant in Lexington in terms of, arrests and crime, and just these kids would come in and they were just like these little urchin kids. And then they would get in her music class, whether they could do anything else successful for the rest of the day. And I'm telling you, you could just watch them. They'd go into her music and they would come out and they were somebody. And they mattered, and they were proud of themselves. And she would do these music concerts, and she would have all these kids do little navy pants, little white shirts, and we all had to try to find navy pants and white shirts for these kids. But they would get up there and they would sing incredibly. Like they would just open their mouths and you thought that, it was the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. They were great. And they were became well known in Lexington as the elementary school choir. And then she started taking them on trips. So then, they'd go to do an assembly over at this school and an assembly over at this school. And then these kids were getting, they dressed up and came to school. And I'm going with Miss Reeb today, to do a presentation, and we were singing, and she had them doing solos and instruments, and I am telling you that she was the heart of Arlington Elementary, and those kids would do anything for Linda Reeb. And so when somebody couldn't get them, to be successful, they would just go talk to Linda and try to figure out, how to go from Linda to help the kid. And I just saw an incredible amount of effect from just Linda's presence. And for her to tell me that she got a lot of those strategies from Central Christian Church, from a program she saw here, just helps us remind ourselves that, the seeds that we sow here go out into the world, into the community, and do huge, huge amounts of good. My head's off to you.
Marcella.
My daughter Leanne was a student of Linda's at Arlington School, and Leanne was already taking piano lessons. But they came and they just hooked up, and Leanne played a part of Little Red Riding Hood, and she played the piano.
She was the only child that I would choose to do Little Red Riding Hood. She was so smart.
So I think she planted the seed for the music, and then she helped Leanne to get into Scapa as a piano major, and then she went on to be a vocal major, and ended up going to Transylvania, where she received scholarships for that, and I think Linda planted the seed for all that. So all her talents came out, and I had her to thank.
That peacock was dropping feathers all over the place. One other just quick announcement. The next time we gather, Miss Elizabeth will be on maternity leave with any luck. So we will gather without Elizabeth the next time, but gather all the same. Just a friendly reminder too, if you plan on coming to our next meeting, there will be sign-up sheets in the fellowship area. There's a clipboard on the big table out there typically, so just jot your name down and we'll be sure to have enough seats and enough food for everyone. Anything else that we need to do as a quick piece of business?
Unless you want to take one of these, leave them and we'll use them again next time.
Okay. So as a quick adjournment, how about all those who were thankful for music and the gift of song say, Amen.